We should try and get started now. And welcome to everybody. There are no real ground rules for the meeting. We won't be breaking for tea, but if you do feel the need to go and make a cup of coffee, please do so. There are some ground rules, like if you're going to listen to the radio as well, please turn off your mic. Welcome to the Bridge Maths and Science Community of Practice meeting. It's our second online meeting. We managed to get in a live meeting at the beginning of the year, which was the best attended we had ever had. And our first online meeting might even have topped that number, but it really does seem to serve some purpose. And if that is the case, we're very pleased about it. I'd like to thank, as always, Benta, who's put this all together. She does all the legwork, all the contacting of people, and without her, this just wouldn't happen. And therefore, by extension, her organization, which is Bridge, that keeps these maths and science and evaluation and various other communities of practice going. And it is a very useful forum. I think perhaps its usefulness is growing, and I'm hoping that today we could do something that people find particularly valuable. We've gone into this crazy world pretty well cold. We've not trained ourselves to do the things that we've had to do in the last 156 days or something like that from lockdown, and some of us were lucky enough to get in a little bit of practice just before the lockdown, but we've gone in cold. And I think it's a truism to say that the learning curve has been steep. It's been very steep. It's been about as exponential as the rate of infections of COVID-19. But we have learned a lot, and I think it's we've probably far enough into the whole exercise to now start taking stock of some of the things that we have learned. And what we'd like to focus on today is not just the things that we've learned, and not just the tricks of getting better online service going in our schools, but also to start looking at some of the problems. We make a lot of assumptions and tacit assumptions about education when we go into teaching, and we assume a lot. And we have conventions and traditions that we stick to, sometimes unwittingly. And we don't really investigate, examine, interrogate those conventions and traditions perhaps as much as we should. But now when we're thrown into a situation like this, it's forcing us to do that, to question some of our fondly held beliefs about education. The question now is whether online teaching can replace what it has before, what we had before, whether any kind of technological platform can give us what we had before. And I suppose by reflection, it says to us, let's think about what we had before and decide whether it was as valuable as we always just assumed it was. I believe it was. Some of you might believe differently, and that's what we're here for. We're here to debate. We're here to discuss the issues of online education and education in general. Is this online just the best thing we can do in an unfortunate set of circumstances? Or are we finding things now that we are able to do better than we were doing before when we were face to face with our pupils? Is education going this way? Is there something that we can take from what we're doing now and make it a formal part of our educational service, our educational offering? Or do we want to get away from it as soon as possible and back to what we had before? What have we learned? What will we change? What will we keep the same? Now, in order to get the discussion going, and there are a lot of people here that have got many years of educational experience which they will bring to the party today, but in order to get things started, we have two speakers who will prime the pump for us. The first of those speakers, and I think what I'll do is I will introduce them both together now, and then we will ask one of them to start. The first of the speakers who will start, he's asked if he can, is Lawrence Manyesa. Lawrence is the current head of Vuleka SSB. That's the right way around. Vuleka SSB in Randburg. Lawrence is an English teacher by background. He did a BA in education. He did a PGCE. He did a diploma in instructional leadership, and then took an MEd in educational management. And so very well qualified and also very well experienced, because he has taught for many years. He was headmaster of a Leap Maths and Science School in Garankuwa, I believe. Is that correct, Lawrence? I think it was the Leap.
Correct, Peter.
Garankuwa. Well, I'll assume I was correct. He then became a project leader for the Leap schools, and has since then become the head of Vuleka SSB in Randburg, as I said. He's a family man. He has 2 daughters and a son. By the looks of his WhatsApp picture, they are youngsters. And he is, in fact, quite a young man himself, even with all his experience. And so Lawrence will be taking us into this as our first speaker. And then our second speaker is another person with a great deal of experience. He is Greg Turon. He has recently become the executive head of Redham House Waterfall, executive head and head of the senior college at Redham House Waterfall. And he, in fact, is my executive head, because I'm teaching there as well. He started his educational life at Mondior in Johannesburg. He then went to Wits, not really knowing what he wanted to do, so he took a fairly general BA, which included social anthropology and sociology and geography, as one does in a general BA. But then he was hooked by geography. He went on and did an honors degree in geography. And
hi, I apologize for the noise in the background. School is going a bit crazy today. You will also notice from some visual evidence that this insert has been put in after the fact. I would just like to make an apology and a correction for my introduction of our second speaker, Greg Turon. I'm afraid my mouth went off for a bit of a gallop, and I kept talking about his MEd that he didn't complete. Well, that was wrong on 2 counts. First of all, he did complete it, and secondly, it was an MSc in climatology. What happened was that he did his MSc, and he was then persuaded by David Wild to take a post at St. Stithians. At that stage, his supervisor, Professor Tyson, had got a grant which would have allowed him to do his PhD, and he thought he'd go and teach just for a little while, then go and do his PhD. Well, 10 years later, he had no PhD when he left St. Stithians to go to Michael House, and he had become a confirmed teacher. So with that small correction and big apology to Greg, thanks very much.
At Penryn, he was the headmaster down there in the Lowveld, Nelspruit, for 14 years, and then got the post of headmaster at Michael House, where he was for 5 years. And since then, he's been a head at Crawford School in Lone Hill, and now most recently, my boss. So there are our 2 speakers, and I'm going to ask Lawrence if he would mind kicking off. We're going to limit them to 15 minutes apiece, and then we will have a time for questions, points, things that you would like to get a little bit more information on from what they've been saying in their talks. So, Lawrence, the floor is yours. The screen is yours, whatever the correct term is these days. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Peter, for the warm welcome and the warm introductions, and for giving me both the platform and the floor. And thank you so much for that. I will be presenting, representing what we've done at Vuleka SSB High School in Randburg. Honestly, it has not been a good time for all of us, but we have, as a school, tried our best to make sure that our learners continue to learn despite the difficulties that we've had due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm going to share my screen here. Topic on online teaching, the challenges and possibilities that we have had in our school. And I will share how we have dealt with the challenges, and I'll also celebrate the successes that we have had in terms of teaching online. I'll quickly describe or explain what online teaching is. And based on a definition by Jules Payet and Dizou 2003, and I quote, delivery of instruction using different web-based technologies from the internet or an intranet and other communication technologies that enable students to participate in learning activities beyond the campus, from students' homes to workplaces and other locations, close quote. And I'll move on to what Vuleka SSB did to prepare for online teaching. We had a lot to do because we're doing this for the first time in our school. And what's important is that we were doing this remotely because COVID-19 caught us unawares. When we closed on March 18, we never knew that we were going to stay at home for a longer period. We thought we were going to come back to school soon, but alas, that did not happen. So it was not easy for us as a school to coordinate the teachers who were on holiday, to coordinate the learners who were at home, to coordinate even our parents. But we were able to make use of our database and get all contacts of our parents and communicate with them to be able to get our learners. So it wasn't an easy thing, but the good thing that we did was we managed to do that during the March holiday because we anticipated through the national trends that we watched on television, through the national statistics that were trending during that time, we thought it was necessary for us to be proactive. So we made our teachers come together online, communicate with them, communicate with our parents, and communicate with our learners in order to make platforms that we could use for online teaching. And we wanted to reach out to all our learners, but I can assure you that it wasn't an easy task. It was quite tough for us to be able to do that remotely. One good thing that we did was to conduct surveys with our parents to establish what gadgets and platforms we were going to use. And Vuleka SSB trained teachers in using Edmodo, WhatsApp, and Zoom. And these were the platforms that we were going to use. We created WhatsApp groups and Edmodo classes for our learners. And our teachers trained learners to use Edmodo with WhatsApp and Zoom. It was important to train teachers and learners because we needed to formalize communication with learners on these platforms. We foresaw challenges that would come if our teachers and learners were not trained. So our teachers and learners were used to WhatsApp on informal platforms, but we needed to formalize this so that we could observe some protocols that could guide us in our teaching and learning online that would make the work that we were going to do a success. And we wanted our teachers and learners to use technology appropriately and responsibly. We wanted the WhatsApp or any other form that we were going to use not to be used informally, but for formal purposes so that our learners and teachers will still respect the spaces that needed to be respected. So we created protocols that governed our teachers and our learners. And we stuck to times in our operations. And we operated between 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. from Monday to Friday. And this later changed to 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. from Monday to Thursday. This was due to the feedback that we continuously got from our parents, from our learners, from our teachers. The beginning wasn't easy because it created a lot of fatigue from our teachers. They were teaching online for the first time. Our learners also experienced a lot of fatigue. To have them stick on their cell phones and laptops at home from 8 to 2 p.m. wasn't an easy thing. So we looked into that and we continuously reflected and checked our quantity as well as not neglecting the quality of work that we're giving to our learners. We emphasized the need for both our teachers and learners to use appropriate places for lessons. In as much as online teaching and learning allows us to teach anywhere or learn anywhere, but it was important for us to be cognizant of the fact that those environments that we operated from, between our teachers and our learners, were supposed to be environments that were safe, environments that were quiet, environments that were formal. For example, a teacher wouldn't conduct a class online when they are walking on a mall, or a child wouldn't attend a class when they are on the streets. So we needed to be very clear with that so that we formalized the whole process of online learning and teaching for our learners and teachers to benefit from the process. And one good thing that we also did was to conduct parent-grade meetings in which we received feedback about online classes from our parents. Devices that we used, the surveys that we conducted provided us with information on what type of gadgets we were going to use or what type of gadgets that our parents and our learners had. We were able to find out that some of our children would be using their parents' gadgets, and that meant that we needed to respect some protocols in case we were going to interfere with the private lives of our parents. So we were going to be very cautious about that.
Sorry, Lawrence, could I just interject something? Could you please turn off your microphones if you are doing other things in the background, and we can turn them on when you would like to engage with the speakers. Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you, Peter. And amongst the gadgets that we used, based on the researches and surveys that we did, we managed to realize that cell phones, tablets, laptops, desktops, and iPads were going to be used by our learners. But the majority of our learners used cell phones. A few had tablets, quite a few laptops, very few had desktops, and probably a percentage or so had iPads for the online teaching and learning. And the surveys also informed us on what type of platform we were going to use for our online teaching at Vuleka SSB. But the initial stage, we used WhatsApp. And our teachers created class WhatsApp groups for their teaching areas. And these groups were used for teaching and learning. Classes were conducted in these groups. Text, notes, voice notes, video clips, graphs, diagrams, and photographs were shared in these classes, and there was immediate feedback from the learners. It was a conversational process, but WhatsApp on its own had its own main challenges. And through reflection and feedback that we got from our teachers and our learners, we reviewed how we were using WhatsApp, and we even reviewed and saw the need to continue using WhatsApp for learning purposes. We also had Edmodo, and Edmodo The process that we followed for WhatsApp was the same process that was used to create Ed model classes for our teachers, for our kids.
Wait, mute. Mohlala, where do I mute?
What did you do?
Stop it.
Could you please turn off your microphones if you're talking in the background? Thank you.
Zoom was another platform that we used, but not all our classes used Zoom. Zoom wasn't a popular platform for our school because it did not have the right things that we needed in order to conduct successful classes. And it was also an expensive platform for our learners and for our teachers who were operating from their homes. But through our surveys and consultations, we got to conclude that Microsoft Teams was the best for our school to use for teaching and learning online. And it has got great features for teaching. And all our teachers were trained to use Microsoft Teams, and all these things were happening online. And our teachers had trained all our learners to use the tool and created teams for their classes. Microsoft Teams is the only platform we are using currently for our blended learning. So we have since diverted, we have since moved from using WhatsApp. We no longer using WhatsApp. We are not using Edmodo, we are not using Zoom. We are now only using Microsoft Teams for our blended learning.
If I can't connect on your phone, what's going to happen?
I'm in.
Could those people talking in the background please mute your microphones? It would be appreciated. Thanks very much. Sorry, Lawrence, please continue.
Thank you, Peter. And weighing the successes and challenges of online teaching and learning at Vuleka SSB High School. We have had successes that we celebrate for using online classes. Speaking to one teacher, a maths teacher said to me in response to the success of online teaching, and I quote what the maths teacher said to me: the key to success was to be very well prepared in a way very different from the usual. I had to spend time making pre-recorded videos of me explaining topics while using a whiteboard. These were made in conjunction with further explanatory pre-recorded voice notes, which were kept in sequential order. This facilitated a simple rollout of lessons and gave the learners an opportunity to visualize the lessons as it occurred. That was a maths teacher. And the science teacher's response was, and I quote, "Although a video of experiments cannot give you the same effect as doing the experiments yourself, the videos at least gave learners an opportunity to see science in action. I used YouTube videos of experiments to enhance the learning experience," said the science teacher. We managed to get close to 90% of our learners on WhatsApp within a short space of time, and this was followed by classes and learning went well. And following our school calendar, we were supposed to open school for second term on the 14th of April, and we opened on that date with our online classes starting on the same date. So for us, that was a great achievement. Since then, our learners have been learning in as much as we have had difficulties here and there, but we have managed to have classes since the 14th of April. And when schools opened for grade 12s and grade 7s on the 3rd of June for our school, we got an opportunity to get parents and learners walk in school to fetch learning packs for their learners, for their children. And this helped our learners, the learners who did not have access to online classes. We made a weekly timetable for different grades to walk in at different times to collect learning packs. So we eventually got to have 100% outreach to all our learners based on the fact that we had some parents and learners who did not have access to online classes come to school, fetch learning material, submit work on a weekly basis, fetch more work for the coming week, and so on and so forth. So, and as a school, in terms of our successes, we have had an improvement in terms of our communication and collaboration amongst teachers. And also we have improved our knowledge of technology because of the pressure that has been put on us by COVID-19. And we've also faced challenges, but we have been able to deal with challenges as they came. And we have been kept on top of things in order to make sure that learning still continued meaningfully for our children. In April, it wasn't easy for our HODs to check up on staff. It was also difficult for teachers to set up work without their textbooks. So when we closed at the end of first term, all textbooks, all the teaching material was left in the school. So for teachers to be able to refer to those textbooks and materials at school, it wasn't easy because of the lockdown period that we were in. And when we did our reports for June, it wasn't easy to get our reports to all the parents because some of the parents did not have WhatsApp and did not have email addresses, so we could not send all reports to all parents. But parents were able to get these when schools started opening up in June. And some learners could not concentrate because they were hungry. We have a feeding scheme in our school. Our school is a low-fee school, so we've got some kids who get fed when they're at school. So there were challenges in that some of the learners were hungry during learning time and they couldn't concentrate so well. And again, there was something that the school did in order to get food parcels that were sent out to our children to be able to eat so that they go to class. Measurement of success. We had ways to make sure that our learners were able to So measuring success was done at times in every simple ways. For example, by just asking a learner, checking for understanding during learning time on these platforms, and also giving learners exercises to complete and marking them thereafter. And we also tested our learners using online quizzes or longer, more theoretical tests to check if they were understanding, if we were achieving our results, our objectives for all the lessons that were taught online. And the most valuable test, that was a quote from a science teacher. The most valuable test of the online success was when the grade 12s got back to school. And I began with a revision of the work taught during the online classes. Learners were able to participate and they clearly knew what I was teaching, close quote. And we also gave baseline assessments, which were administered to check how much was learned, and our results showed that our learners mastered concepts that were taught online. And we issued out report cards to all our learners. The report also showed the learners online attendance. Then we constantly got positive feedback from our parents, and we used criticism from our parents to review our processes of online teaching and learning. Thank you, Peter. For now, I'll stop here and I will wait for the question and answer session to get deeper into the details that I did not speak about here. But this is a summary of the work that was done by Vuleka SSB, and I will respond to questions and comments when it's question and answer session. Thank you.
Lawrence, if I may venture an opinion, I think you've done an extraordinary job under very difficult circumstances. Thank you very much for that description. I'm sure that quite a lot of points will come out of it. It seems that you've managed the electronic and digital side perhaps better than the administrative side, and that the administrative side is what has really given you the headaches. But the fact that the kids can come back, the matrics can come back and actually be on top of the work, having done everything from scratch on online, is really, really fantastic. Well done. Could I just make a quick administrative announcement here? We do like to keep a record of who's been at the meeting. I see some people might have to leave early because of load shedding, and I believe it's what the kids now call sheds. So there's going to be sheds down in the Western Cape, and the UWC people might only be here until 11. Could I ask everybody, please, now to put both your name and your organization into the chat box? And if you're there as if you're sitting as a group, I'm not sure if that's happening, please could we have individual names and then your organization as well? Okay, thank you very much, Lawrence. We will come back to you when we do a little joint question and answer with you and Greg. But I'd like to ask Greg if he would do his presentation now.
Hello, Peter, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I hope everybody can.
Okay. Morning, colleagues, and thank you for the opportunity of sharing space and time with you, if only virtual space and time. Peter has asked me to talk on pitfalls, problems, possibilities of online teaching, and frankly, I don't know. I haven't taught online. So all I've done is I've listened to teachers. I can give you a few insights based on that, both at Crawford Landhill and here at Redham Waterfall. And I'll repeat a few things that Peter said. He said we went in cold. Yeah, yes, we did. I'll repeat some of that stuff. Lawrence also, and well done, Lawrence, on a very comprehensive explanation of what Vuleka has done. And I stand in awe of what you've done. I mean, it's a lot more comprehensive than I've managed to achieve in the two schools that I've been part of. And also, interestingly, for the first time in my career, the experience that Peter read out at the beginning actually doesn't matter. It means very little because it's changed. And what it does signify is a lifetime in education, thinking about, planning towards, implementing what we thought was best practice. But that was in a system that really was handed to me and my cohort when we left university to enter schools, as it was with you, I assume, people that are watching, most of you. You know, we didn't agree with a lot of it. It just was. We argued that it needed to change potentially, but the system then pushed back and said, well, how do we do that? Actually, the world is used to us. It wants us, and things just continue. We also said perhaps that the system, somebody's microphone's on. We talked about the system being based on militaristic kind of rigid needs of the Industrial Revolution. Everybody said, well, how do we change that? You know, I've often said to people that the teachers are the worst people in the world to make change, to effect change. They like the system. They buy into it when they become teachers. They've kept it going for 200 years. Of course, computers came along at a point and we all said, yeah, no, they're going to change things. But they didn't, did they? All they did was refine the process of education that we were stuck in, that had existed since the blackboard was invented perhaps 200 years ago. Anyway, I think that's enough philosophizing, because this all changed on March the 5th when we had our first COVID case in this country. I think it was down in Hilton somewhere. which was, of course, followed on the 23rd by the president's speech, and he announced lockdown on the 26th. It was 22 weeks ago, can you believe? And all hell broke loose. I don't know how else to describe it. You know, we had a week to try and reinvent the fundamentals. We had to reinvent the entire body of knowledge of education, a new model of delivery, of understanding perhaps, of what is important. And frankly, it was chaos. I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, we were told about this, and then we actually started teaching 3 or 4 days later at Lone Hill. You know, but there's another part. I'd just like to read you a quote. It's out of a wonderful book called Thank You for Being Late by Thomas Friedman. And it says, when you press the pause button on the machine, it stops. But when you press the pause button on human beings, they start. You start to reflect, you start to rethink your assumptions, you start to reimagine what is possible, and most importantly, you start to reconnect with your most deeply held beliefs. And I think that's what happened to us. We pushed the pause button to some extent. We all started talking about things and thinking about education perhaps the first time in a while. You know, we started talking about M&S Teams, Google Classrooms. MS Teams collapsed, remember, in the first week or so that we started using it. Started talking about Zoom, Blue Jeans. We found out things that you could use WhatsApp for that we never even began to think of before. And within a month, we were veterans. We had blood on our shoulders, but we'd fought the fight. And, you know, we were the only teachers in the history of the world that had gone through a digital revolution. It was heady stuff. And a lot of pride, I think, involved in the process. Then I would like to now also pause and just talk about psychology a little bit, because this is one of my observations of where we are as a profession. There's a wonderful psychological book called The Road Less Traveled by a chap called Scott Peck. It came out in the 80s. And he talks about depression, amongst other things. And he talks about depression as a process of growing mentally and emotionally. He talks about the depressed state as a reaction to this change and growth, and that there's a sign, it's a sign that there's a part of ourselves perhaps that we've got to give up so that we may grow to a more authentic, meaningful existence. What am I talking about, frankly? Well, I think after the initial excitement, really, and the problem solving that we all went through, we realized that we'd lost education. Certainly the old model and how things had been done were gone. And once we realized that, I think we became depressed. And my contention is that we need to acknowledge that. Because our professional depression, I suspect, is not just mourning over the dead body of what education used to be, but that we also need to acknowledge that we are now in a process of growing. We're replacing that. And I think teachers need to start talking about that. And talking about it as staff rooms, as subject groups, whatever it is that you've got available to you. I think part of the pitfalls that Peter asked me to talk about is to not do that. Because if we don't do that, well, then I think we're in trouble. In fact, I don't think we should ever go back to normal, to answer something that Peter said early on, because normal, in fact, wasn't working. Well, it wasn't working optimally. And if we go back to the way things were, we would have lost the lesson. You know, we need to do better. We need to challenge ourselves more, much better. Of course, the other side of the coin to pitfalls is possibilities, opportunities, a new and better way of doing things, which frankly is what this morning is all about. And I'm honored to be part of the first online meeting to talk about this. So what are those things? And I don't really know, do I? None of us do. If I said to you, what's education going to look like on the 2nd of September 2021, and you described it with certainty, I would laugh at you. I mean, if you think of March to September this year and what has changed, how on earth do we realize what's going to happen in the next year to September the 2nd? Because actually the new normal that has replaced the old one is now starting to creak. We're starting to understand that. And Lawrence described it far more eloquently than I could. In fact, for millions of students in this country, it never started, which is probably the starkest, most disturbing fact of the lot. And we are now as a society more unequal, certainly at student level, than we were before. So what to do? I'm a great believer in the power of strategy, and I think this meeting is part of that. Strategy is an end point towards which we all strive and we agree on, and then we construct the path to get there. We can talk about the why, we can talk about all the other stuff that's flying around, but it doesn't help us define what this new thing looks like. And you know, I think a large part of defining this is perhaps the largest part is collaboration and a collaborative process. We acknowledge to each other that we need each other in the education process, students included, very important part of it for the first time, if we're to be honest, parents included, industry included, and then we move forward towards achieving the end goal of that once we've collaborated and agreed and thrashed it out and had dialogue. Of course, I think we're all going to agree on equal education for all in this nation, in this world of ours. It includes perhaps personal mastery, it includes civics education, it includes preparation for the world, and that's the strategy. And then the collaboration will be on what we do and how we do this. I mean, for example, this presentation is appalling. You know, it's me reading off notes. It's probably too long. I don't have PowerPoints. I don't have voice prompts and all that other kind of stuff that I think are going to become normal very quickly. I think we understand what this thing is now all about. And we can sit and talk about this for days. We really could. I mean, I could. But, you know, we could look at structures of lessons. We quite quickly have established a process where we think best practice means the teacher checks in online, establishes authority online, asks the kids how they're doing, adds the personal touch. How was yesterday? Isn't it cold today? Gives a body of knowledge. Tests the body of knowledge with an exercise that the students use and give back on email or WhatsApp or whatever you're using. You then have some form of quiz, form, or assessment. The teacher then says, where are we going in the next lesson? Gives them homework, and that checks out. I think that's a very good lesson structure. We don't know if it's the best, but we quite quickly have established that. Now, is it the best one? How do we do it? How do we tweak it? We could talk about that for a long, long time. And I think it's time that we really started asking, and we've talked about this in assessment workshops for years, how do we know that the students know what they're supposed to know? Because once we get there and we start thinking that through and really asking the kids that, I think we're going to start getting to where this wonderful opportunity has taken us. And we do have a wonderful opportunity. Yeah, and as I said, we could talk about this for days. But Peter, that's all I've got to say for what it's worth. Thank you for the opportunity once again.
Thank you very much, Greg. You will stay with us, and we will. I think what we'll do now is we'll have a preliminary question and answer, maybe 10 minutes, and we will start flagging some of the points that people take from Lawrence and Greg's presentations. I think we've got a nice mix there. Greg was perhaps a little bit more philosophical, and Lawrence certainly spoke about experiences in a very comprehensive way. So there's a lot to take from that. I'm reminded of a quote. Well, I don't have to be reminded because I re-quote it so often, from Arthur C. Clarke, who is the science fiction writer who wrote the story for 2001: Space Odyssey. Those of us that are old enough to remember it probably shouldn't be here. But he once said that any teacher who can be replaced by technology should be. And I think that says quite a lot. Teachers have not become redundant now because of technology. In fact, I think we might just find in our discussions today that we think teachers are probably more important than ever. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to ask you if you would like to raise some points, not for long discussion, but perhaps even just to flag certain points, and perhaps to ask for brief responses from Lawrence and Greg, if you just want to clarify what it is they were saying or what they were getting at in anything that they said. Could I open the floor just for 10 minutes or so to see if there's anybody that wants to engage with Greg and Lawrence?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lana Blooms. I'm from Edunova. I'm actually an intern, and I'm responsible for looking at innovative measures that we can implement in our after-school programs. And what we do, one of our vision is to actually integrate ICT in the schools as it is. And if we look at the time that we are actually in the fourth industrial revolution. And what this pandemic has proven to us, I believe that you all will agree with me, that technology is very essential in our lives today, and in how we will mitigate the effects that this pandemic has put upon us. And even if we look at it, at the fact that it may not just be a sickness pandemic that will overtake us maybe in the future or times from now. It can be natural disasters, tornadoes and floods like that, which will make it unable for kids to get to school. So I believe in that if we are going to start putting more emphasis on making our kids and our teachers computer literate in a way where they feel confident using this technology, because a lot of the times we go to a lot of rural areas and the kids have never even touched a computer or know what it is to surf the web. So I know a lot of limitations will come in that because a lot of these resources are not made available to all our kids in South Africa. But I do believe if we put a bit more emphasis on computer literacy and make it more compulsory for our teachers and our learners to know and to use it effectively, I think in future we will even fight it more effectively. And I know they have done it very good, seeing that it hit us like just out of the blue and nobody was really prepared for it. So what if we were prepared for this? I believe we could have handled it more better, not saying that we didn't handle it in a good manner. So
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lawrence. That to me is a very South African response, because I think South Africans are pretty tough people. They're pretty entrepreneurial. They look for opportunities, sometimes in great hardship. And I think people like Edunova are actually finding it. It's quite interesting to see the talking about this pandemic of ours as serving a useful purpose in accelerating us into the fourth industrial revolution and forcing us to find answers quicker. Thank you for that comment. Could you put your comments onto the chat box and I can take them from there? So, but until you've had time to type, is there anybody that wants to squeeze in ahead of my new protocol?
Can I do?
Tuduzile?
Hi, Peter. Thank you, Peter. I have a question or more of a clarification for Lawrence. I understand that in your presentation you mentioned that now you have settled on Teams because it seems to accommodate all of the other aspects that you wanted to do. But I didn't get the part on in the terms of accessibility, the data, because you are feeding in school, so it means issues of parents not affording is there. I want to understand how you are dealing with the data issue.
Lawrence, did you get the gist of the question?
Yes, Peter, I can respond to that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So initially what we did was we had teachers offering to donate money for data to our children when we began online classes in April. But in the long run, that was not going to be sustainable to have our teachers take out their own personal money to buy data for learners. And it wouldn't cover quite the number of learners that we had intended to be covered for. So what we did as a school was to look for funding, and we managed to get funding for data for all our learners in our school. We've got 314 learners, and all the 314 learners, we got data for them. And we also got data for all our teachers. We have got 26 teachers and about 7 non-teaching staff. So in total, we received a donation of data for 343 people for a period of 3 months. And the conversation that we had with our donor was that they were going to donate as long as we wanted the data for our learners. So the Microsoft Teams has been facilitated and is being facilitated by the fact that we have got data for all our learners and teachers that has been donated by a well-wisher for our school.
That is outstanding. I think the issue of data is going to become, well, it's already become very important. And also, I giggle a little bit because if you go down to Waterfall, where I teach, there were banners on the light poles saying, Mr. Ramaphosa, come and see what the new city, the new city looks like. The new style of city. If you remember Mr. Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address at the beginning of last year, he was talking about super cities that were digital and so on. And they said, come and look, we've got it. Well, it took about 2 weeks after lockdown to find out that they had some way to go before they got it as well. And data is an issue. Well, congratulations on cracking that one, Lawrence. Let's have a look. I've got a question here. Question for Lawrence. What was the format of the material taken home by those learners who had no internet access? Did they manage to evaluate if that was as effective as the audio and visual learning that the rest of the learners were getting? Again to you, Lawrence.
So the format of the work that was sent out to learners, we had packs that were collected from school by parents and learners, and these were this could have been notes that were well explained and activities that would follow after the notes, and these were then evaluated in a way where learners would do that work and submit the work in the following week when they come to collect new work for that week. And in terms of work that was sent out online, we sent out PDFs, we sent out audios, we sent out videos, but again, based on the type of platforms and that we were using, we constantly reviewed to see whether that was feasible for platforms like WhatsApp, for example. That's why I said earlier that we had to divert away from the use of WhatsApp because it had its own limitations in terms of types of formats that were sent out to our learners. Types of formats that were used in sending out material and information to learners.
Okay, thank you. Some of the questions they tend to be quite practical at the moment, where parents help and parents and apps are used to help the kids. What can we do to ensure that it is their own work? This is Barry Barnard. Well, yeah, let's leave that one hanging for the moment. There was another question to Lawrence. Adaptation, we should always be willing to change. Change is what makes us human. our views should always be reshaped. Life is about evolution. And, all right, just a general comment, but never has it been truer than now. My question is, how do you ensure that learners were learning what they were supposed to learn and they actually understood? Basing the question on Lawrence's presentation. Lawrence, perhaps a quick comment on that?
Can you come again on that?
All right, the question says, how do you ensure that learners are learning what they're supposed to learn and that they actually understand, they understand what it is they're supposed to have learned? I think this is also touching on perhaps the more psychological and philosophical side of things that that Greg accentuated. But Lawrence, how do you test whether kids are actually understanding what they're supposed to have learned?
So I referred to my presentation on the quizzes that we gave to the learners, but still I saw there was one question also that said, how could you be so sure that the quiz was completed by a child or the parent? And I think it's not easy to determine that the work was done by the child or the parent. But this is a new normal that we are in. What we have done at Vuleka is to have engagements with our parents, and we constantly have those conversations with our parents, make sure that the parents, it's not their job to do the child's work. And even in terms of doing homework during normal times where we're not using online classes, that we have had conversations with our parents that homework is not done by parents. It's the child's job to do the homework. The parents have to be there to make sure that the child does the homework, but not to do the homework. But in any case, like I'm saying, it won't be easy for us to be so sure that this work was not done by the parent, but it was done by the child. But in terms of using platforms like Microsoft, a teacher can actually conduct a test, give a test, and have all the on their videos and write a test. But still, we cannot be so sure of what's really happening behind the camera, behind when the kids are at home. So like you are saying, it's quite philosophical to debate on that. I'm not sure if Greg can respond to that. But from our side, what we've done is to constantly have conversations with our parents to make sure that the learning is for their children, not for them.
Greg, would you like to add something there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, and Lawrence, again, a very comprehensive answer to that question. There is software out. I mean, the Swedes have something called exam.net, which is specifically designed for students taking exams, assessments online. It's not foolproof though. Nothing is foolproof online. If a child wants, in fact, we had an exercise at a previous school where we said to the kids, okay, here's the system, take it and break it, and show us how you could do that. And I mean, they quite quickly worked out ways to cheat if they wanted to cheat. I mean, that's just issue. I think another thing to talk about here is the kinds of questions. If they're more open-based, if they're more thoughtful, if it's going to be something that a child cannot necessarily get the answers to easily, that's another thing. So we need to look at the way we assess. I think we're assessing fairly well, but I think we can assess a lot better. So I think, again, we need to start asking those questions. Thanks for that.
I'm going to end this the question and answer now and move on to the next phase. But there's a piece that I think, if you haven't seen it on the chat box already, you should look at. But I think it's worth reading. It comes from Turon, and she says, I think it's incredible what teachers have done in this short amount of time. I'm concerned about equal access, though, and the growing digital divide. I've been lecturing from home in a rural area in the Eastern Cape. There are so many children here who have no educational stimulus, who have had no educational stimulus since the beginning of lockdown. No devices and no data for teachers or children. No communications from the school to the parents. It breaks my heart. What can we do for them? Who is responsible for initiating solutions and strategies? And perhaps that is the elephant in the room. Now, we'll bear that in mind, and it will come up again. But when we were discussing what to talk about at this COP and how we should frame it, it occurred to me that we always have our experts. They come along with academic track records and titles and degrees, and we've got some young learner in the background who's getting involved here. And we listen to them and we debate, and we do it all at a high level. We have people who come in and offer practical advice, usually with good theoretical background and theoretical support for the sorts of things that we should be doing rather than what we are doing. But because we're talking today about the pitfalls and the problems and the possibilities of this new situation that we've been thrown into so suddenly, we've got a class of experts that we don't really speak to enough. And of course, I'm referring to the receivers, or at least the younger half of that educational transaction, the pupils. And so what we've done today is we've constructed a small panel of three young learners from some schools. I'll start with a young lady, a matric young lady, Cisco Mashabela, from, I think, a LEAP school. I'm not absolutely sure, but she's a grade 12 pupil in Limpopo. Then Lawrence has brought along Onati Matibela. So we've got a Mashabela and a Mati. He's a grade 10 pupil at Vuleka SSB. And I've invited from Redham House Waterfall a young lady called Dia Kandai. And in fact, it was something that she said, was putting me in my place a couple of weeks ago, that gave me the thought that there's a lot of wisdom that comes out of those young heads and young mouths, and perhaps it's time we allow them to talk and explain what it's like from their point of view. They will have heard some of the discussions that have gone on now, and Onati at least can verify what Lawrence has been talking about, but because he's from that school. But I will introduce them, or at least ask them to introduce themselves now very briefly so that you can see them. If you can, the three of you, could you please put on your videos so that we can see you, Onati, Cisco. And then I'm going to ask you to engage with them about what it's like from their point of view. What has really bugged them? What have they really enjoyed? There I can see Dia is with us. What have they really enjoyed? What has been better? What has definitely been worse? And I know some of the answers, I think, but I'm not going to give them because I'd like to hear it from their mouths. And so, Dia, there you are. Let's see if we've got Cisco. There we go. Is that, I see Mr. R. Is that Cisco? Hi, Cisco. How are you? How's your microphone?
Oh, hello. Thank you, Mr. People.
It's perfect. It's perfect. Just let me try and find Onati. I see there Onati Matabela. Can you put on your video? There he is. Good show. All right. Should we start with the senior of our three? Leave your video on, Onati, if you can. Cisco, let's take you as the senior lady in the group. a matric pupil, would you just tell us a little bit about yourself and the school that you come from, and maybe 1 or 2 comments about your online experience before we open it to questions that will put all of you on the spot. Siska, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Peters. So as I was already introduced, I am Sisko Mashabela, currently doing grade 12 at Leap 5 Science and Math School. It was really a hectic time when we had to do classes online, because it's not something that we actually expected, especially for us learners coming from rural schools where we are not used to working with technology and struggling to have the necessary resources needed for us to attend lessons. So it was quite hectic. Most of the time when you're at home, you just feel relaxed and you're not under pressure. So learning was quite difficult because personally, I'm the firstborn, so I was expected to take care of kids at home, and at the same time, I had to attend lessons, I had to do chores. So it was really hectic. But one thing that I can say was an advantage out of all of this is that it actually prepared most of us that.
Siska, just hang on a second. Could you please put off your microphone? Thanks very much. Carry on, Siska.
Oh, yes. As I was saying, the school also tried to provide us with data when necessary, even though not all learners were able to join in the lessons that we had. Some learners were missing lessons. And yeah, the lessons were effective for some people, and for others, they were not effective. So they were actually structured in a way that they started from 7:30 in the morning and then ended at 4 o'clock in the evening. And then teachers provided us with notes that were well explained. And if there was a need for the teacher to clarify on certain topics, they'd send audios to the groups. It's just unfortunate that they could not send videos because they were costly. And as I said, not everyone had the resources to be participating in the groups. But the school managed to donate or give learners who were struggling to get the resources, they gave them tablets. But yeah, those who were able to use their parents' phones also managed to attend using their parents' phones. And then coming from a school in the rural areas was quite a disadvantage, because most of us are not really used to this technology thing. But I'd say it gave us a chance to actually learn and be exposed to technology, especially because we might be going to universities next year, and there's certain things that we just have to do online. So it's not an excuse that we are going to be forever not used to this online learning and this technology. So that's one thing that I'm grateful for. And then in certain cases, the teachers exposed us to certain websites that we can use for further understanding, such as Khan Academy, the e-school that is offered by Vodacom, and also Siavula. And then it was quite stressful. So with our school having a life orientation teacher who's also a psychologist, we were able to be at I can say a normal mental state, because she was always encouraging us to never give up, and then assuring us that everything is going to be okay someday. So in the meantime, we just had to work with what was available. And then, yeah, that's something that I'm grateful for. I'm glad that we are back to school, even though some of the lessons were not quite effective. So we had to repeat them when we reopened. But yeah, I'm generally glad that the school was able to help us in engaging with these online lessons and being able to learn while we were under these situations of the lockdown. Thank you.
Can I just ask you the notes that you were provided with? Did you have to go to the school to collect them? Did you have some system arranged for where you could pick up notes and so on?
We were actually coming to school. People came to school to collect the forms together with food parcels. And then with the data, it was just a matter of sending them electronically.
Okay, good. Okay, let's take our next speaker. Thank you, Cisco. Dia, would you like to weigh in with an introduction?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am a grade 10 learner from Redham House Waterfall, and I think this online teaching experience has been full of ups and downs. For me, it has been more ups than downs, gratefully, thankfully. But I think some things that I have struggled with personally have been more the mental adjustment rather than the physical adjustment, for the very reason that you feel very tired every day to sit in the same place looking at screens all day long. It really takes a toll on you, and you feel very fatigued and really lazy to do work and to focus. So then you lose focus, and then you don't understand concepts and materials taught in class, which if, which then later on affects you in your tests and work you do, and it just leads on to other problems. And also, it's also been really like tiring not to have a social interaction. Like in class, you'd have your classmates there to discuss topics you maybe don't understand or to debate things, and it becomes very boring to just sit by yourself and just have your own opinions on it without discussing it with anyone else really and getting anyone else's views on it. It becomes so, it's just your thoughts, and that becomes very bad after some time because you don't get exposed to anyone else, and it's very, you start, there's no knowledge sharing, and your styles of learning are very compromised in this setting, in that there's only a certain amount of things you can really do to convey knowledge and to tell people what you know or what you don't understand, or to explain things to someone. And in that, I'd say people with a more auditory style of learning have done better during these times compared to a person who has to be very hands-on or more physical. So I'd say there's been many factors to consider while doing this online learning, because everyone has such different experiences. And I, for one, am very grateful that I have access to the internet and devices to be able to do properly online learn. And it's very complicated and hard to just keep focus and motivation and all of those things during online learning.
Thank you, dear. We'll get back to you. There'll be questions flying thick and fast in just a moment. But that let's get Onati just to give a little bit of an introduction from his side. Onati.
Good afternoon. I'm Mati Matiba, grade 10 student at Vulega SB in Randburg. I think Mr. Manus touched on many of the things that I have to touch on, but I think really my school was really good at helping us as learners cope, because not only they teach us and make sure that we understand the work. Teachers would ask us, "Are you okay? How are you guys doing? How is it at home? Do you have data?" If they'd send a YouTube video, they make sure that we can actually go watch the video. And if you went in class, they always make sure that you're okay and that you attend the next lesson, because they'll call you, they'll email you, they'll make sure that you try and go to school by all means. And I think that's really the advantage of being a learner, is that it isn't a school as much as it is a support structure and a family, because there you feel at home and they really sure that you actually understand work and know you on a personal basis. It isn't just a professional relationship. It's like Ms. Magnesa's and the father at school. All my teachers are parents. I think that was really, that's really what made us as students at Vulega cope with this pandemic. And I'm just grateful that I attended school, which made sure that as learners get an education and that we're always okay. That's really what it is.
Right, thank you, Onati. Now, I think what we'll do now, rather than you asking the three panelists questions individually, let's put the questions to the panel, and I will spread around, see who kicks off, and then the others can chime in if they want to. If somebody before them has said what they wanted to say or they think needed to be said, they might decide not to answer that particular question. But we've got the panelists there, Cisco, Nati, and Dia. Can I get general questions that we will put to them and get their responses from? From whom we will get the responses. Mind my grammar. Okay. All right, here's a question. Did any of you carry out practical work at home? Okay, we'll start with Unati and go backwards through the girls.
Yes, of course. When you send work, you actually need to write it down. And for Lega, we go to school once a week, so the teachers can actually check your work and check how far you guys are progressing with the online lesson. So you have to actually do the work. You can't say that you did it or that you did somewhere. You actually have to do it once a week on Friday, and they check it for you and they make sure that you actually understand it.
Onati, let me just remind, this group of people here are maths and science teachers. Maths and science teachers, maths and science educators, that's who we generally have. When they say practical work, I think they're referring to science practical work. Did you ever get things to do at home?
Oh yes, we did. They'd send us experiments. We'd have to do videos, teachers. When we're using what, maybe you do the experiment. When we're in electrostatics, we have to go and actually do the experiment and then send back to the teachers so they see how far we're progressing.
Okay. Dia, practical work.
Yes, I have done a lot of practical work, from recording speeches to doing some science experiments to get a feel for the concepts being taught, and also just doing normal like written work compared to only typing things and sending stuff through via email.
Okay. Do you feel that you are somehow more involved than you would have been if you'd been sitting in a class?
No.
Not.
I definitely feel that if I was in a class, my participation and involvement would be a lot more for the very reasons of like technical difficulties and just not knowing answers per se, or maybe discussing it with a class member or your teacher in person compared to just being online and just everyone sitting there saying nothing.
Okay. Cisco, would you like to come in on that question?
I would like to answer the first question first. We didn't really do much of practicals in terms of the science part where we have to be dealing with chemicals and all that. What we were doing was basically receiving PDFs on our WhatsApp groups and then typing our work and submitting to teachers. And I'm just happy to be at school. For me, this online thing was not working for me, even though my participation was high, simply because most learners were not really participating and there was no interaction, you know. So yeah, my participation is better at school than at home.
Okay, now this is putting you on the spot, and you can take a minute or two to think if you like, or a second or two. Can you share one thing that helped you cope and recommend one thing that we should do to improve learning in this context? You are now talking to teachers who want your practical advice on how to improve learning in the context we find ourselves. And perhaps can I just add to that? If you can think of one important do and possibly some don'ts as well. Who should we start with? You want to start, Cisco?
No, I'd like to think about it for a moment.
You want to think? Who to chime in? Do our two younger members feel competent to fly in?
I'll try. At the beginning, before this got used to it, they used to bombard us with so much work. A period would be 1 hour, 30 minutes, and you sit there and you think and you think it's boring and tiresome. They wouldn't give us many breaks, so it was really quite stressful. Another question, I think, how I coped with is I strengthened my relationship with the Lord, because I think this period has tested a lot of our beliefs and the way we thought the world was. And at first, I would ask myself, why would God do this? But then I strengthened my relationship with Him, and that really helped me cope with this thing.
So you feel your belief has helped you through, has it steadied you as a person, do you think?
I think it's kept me grounded because mental health really has taken a dive, and I think it's kept my head above water for it to get through the periods. Yes.
Okay, that's wonderful. Dia, do's and don'ts.
I think maybe something more teachers could incorporate is different styles of explaining, maybe. Like instead of doing the same lesson or the same type of like teaching method throughout, maybe do something different, like more class discussions, or maybe like to actually demonstrate something compared to maybe just explaining it. And also the do's is very good in terms of many teachers do provide a lot of assistance and class work and examples for you to practice on, so that you're not completely left in the dark and stuff like that.
Okay. Class discussions. Can I just ask you to expand on that a little bit? Because I tend to have I tend to find that people hide behind their icon, and they don't turn on their videos, and they claim that they've got data problems or whatever. How do I?
Well, I think now more people, especially with more learners returning to school, more people are becoming more comfortable with turning on their cameras. I think there was a bit of an adjustment period where it was like, you don't want to turn on your camera because you feel you look bad or something like that. But I think now that adjustment period is over. So I think there's more people becoming more comfortable switching on their cameras. And when I say class discussions, I mean maybe when someone doesn't understand something. In class, normally you would ask the classmate, oh, do you understand this? Do you get this? How do you understand this? What method do you use? So something more like that, where it's more open and everyone's not so scared to be wrong, should I say.
Okay. Folks, I think you'll realize that Dia and I are having a public discussion in public here because this issue has come up. In fact, as little time ago as 1 hour. But Cisco, do you want to add something here?
Since I put you on hold the last time, I thought of things that would keep me coping in the school, which is most importantly having support from my teachers and from parents as well, especially parents, because the learning is happening at home. So they just have to cooperate with you in terms of the chores and providing resources where necessary, ensuring that the background or the area that you're learning in is more conducive. And we also had teachers who were giving us feedbacks and remarks in terms of marking and providing comments. So one thing that I think should be improved is using more of different resources, because most of the time we are using PDFs and audios. Maybe we can find sponsors as well who can provide us with the necessary data so that we can also try out videos, because I feel like it's more effective when I learn in a way that's interactive. When I see the teacher writing and the teacher talking, it makes me understand better. So one thing that I think should be improved as well is that the lessons should be longer, like one lesson should be longer, because we are at home, things are not going to be as quick as when we are in class. And also they have to just bear with us because we are at home. So maybe the starting time could be a later time, probably at 8 instead of 7 or 7:30.
Okay, just the school day. Right. Thank you. Here is another one, and we can see a strand here. These things are questions are very similar in many ways. This is also about strategies, but Chris asks, have you tried to establish chat groups of friends to engage in discussions on topics that you had online lessons to overcome the isolation? If so, was this benefit? So you've had your online lessons. Do you ever get together as friends, online of course, just to discuss things? Possibly a WhatsApp message system, or possibly you can set up a Zoom meeting to discuss things. Perhaps you can get together somewhere in town and stand far enough apart and talk to each other. Anything that any of you have been involved with or tried in that line of thinking?
One thing that we tried in our school is that most of the time we were not really working individually. We were working in groups. So that's the interaction that we're talking about, because we are few in our classes. So it's very easy to have friends. Those are my friends that I'm talking about, the ones that I'm in the groups with, the one that I interact with. So yeah, we were not only focusing on the academic part, but also the social part, and suggesting to each other how we can manage this WhatsApp groups, because when you're online and you're learning, you're on WhatsApp and then you receive a text from a friend. So it's just distracting. We were actually playing around with helping each other on how to actually cope with the situation, having to attend and also having to attend to your social life.
Okay. Dia?
Well, I have tried WhatsApp groups and Zoom calls and stuff. However, I feel like we all get very distracted and we don't end up focusing on the work, rather, because we still miss each other because we don't see each other anymore. So we ended up talking more about other stuff compared to just school. But for some subjects, it did actually help a lot to get someone else's opinion on it and just to go through the work with somebody else, just not you and sitting alone at your desk. So yes, there have been some times where it has helped, but there's also been some times where it was pure.
I don't think you should feel guilty about trying to reignite that social the social meetings, because you know we all know that is something that everybody misses badly. And I think we realize how badly you need it too. So that's helping you to cope in a very important way. Unati, do you have anything you want to add?
No, sir. We also use WhatsApp groups and the chat sort of icon on, so you can ask a friend if they understand the work during the period. You can go outside and actually understand what the saying. You can ask the teacher directly. So we do have a bunch of support structures within the groups to each other cope.
Okay, thank you. Bridget Ann Mullins asks, did any of the students receive support from external organizations, not school or family? I think you may have suggested already, Cisco, that you did. Did you get any support from outsiders? Or perhaps it was Vuleka that I'm thinking of. Has your support come mostly from family and school or from elsewhere?
My support was mainly on the school and from my family, as well as other members that are related to the school.
Okay. So any outside help came to you via the school, and I think Unati, you might same sort of thing, judging from what Lawrence told us earlier about the donations from somebody in order to get data. Is that a yes?
I was on mute. So yes, that is yes. Any support just came from the school.
Okay, how about you, dear?
Yeah, my main support came from the school and my family. There was
Okay.
no external help really.
Not so much. I think perhaps if you want to try that question again, Bridget, and when we go into a plenary and see what other examples of external help other than say school and family, it'd be interesting to hear. Nokatula says, if you were the teacher, what would you do differently to make the experience better? Yes, the volume of work is very important consideration, cutting down. That perhaps is a similar question to one that we took a little while ago, but has anything more occurred to you? It's again, advice for the teachers. You did say things like vary your approach and vary your methods, but anything else that might have occurred to you in the interim?
One thing that I've noticed is that not all learners were participating, and that's something that happens at school as well. Obviously, not everyone is going to participate in class to a point where the teacher has to pick that a certain person in order for them to participate. So one thing that I would do as a teacher is to actually form a new group for students who I feel like they are shy, especially academically, and also in sharing their answers, so that they are also able to express their answers, because I believe learners learn more by doing. So if it's a matter of me just being in a group where I don't really participate, I'm just there looking at people giving answers, it's not really effective. So I was going to create a new group for people who I feel like they are shy, so that they can also be able to interact with the teacher and for better understanding.
Thank you. Nothing more to add there. An interesting question, and listen to this one carefully, from Jenny Glennie. Can you give examples of interactions among learners in the formal sessions? Where is the teacher facilitated pupil-to-pupil, learner-to-learner interaction in your formal lessons? And you can comment on the effectiveness and whether it was enjoyable or not, whether you find it had other beneficial effects. Any comments like that? Dear, do you want to start this one? Off the top of your head, can you think of anything?
Well, for me personally, the teachers were always there to facilitate in terms of if we didn't understand something or there were multiple questions regarding a topic. However, when it came to students' interaction online, I found there to be very little. However, the teacher interaction was quite a lot. But when like students had different opinions to another student, they never voiced it, and then it would come up at a later stage in terms of if you perhaps like reading a passage and had a different opinion on it and didn't say anything and didn't take a different stance on it. It was very monotonous in terms of no one else really said anything because they were scared it was going to be wrong or different. So,
and if something came up later, it had missed its moment, and so it wasn't really as relevant as it had been brought up at the time.
Definitely.
Yeah. Bonati, your any opinions from you?
It's exactly like this. The learn-to-learner, the participation was learners wouldn't really participate with one another in the lesson, but the teachers and learners, they were sure that participate. But like her, it would become very monotonous as well.
Yeah. Okay, the monotony. Cisco?
Well, with the learner-to-learner interaction, we actually had presentations for revisions. Like each learner is given a topic, they do a research on that topic and they present to the class, and the teacher is not really involved for that moment. they'll only be involved afterwards where there's a need for them to add on something or to correct if there was a mistake. So it was mostly about presentations among the learners.
Okay, I'd just like to add something here, because I've got one more. Actually, let me just rather give you what Roseanne Naidu has said, perhaps in answer to this and other possibilities, talking about online discussions are possible if you give learners breakaway sessions on WhatsApp and other platforms. Learners must feel comfortable to use the video, but it should not be compulsory. They can use the chat function to engage as well. Okay, so there is that. Just something about the interpersonal transactions, relations that happen. I was teaching a first period class, 7:30, and Dia was in that class. Now on Mondays I go to school, and so I end up doing online teaching from school, sometimes in a classroom with a few students in it. That day it happened that Dia was there and one other lad. And in the middle of all of this, the electricity went out. It wasn't load shedding, problems with the circuit in the school. And so we lost all of the online people. So I carried on teaching on the board. And Dia asked a question, and I tried to answer it, and it took about 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes. The electricity was still off, so we had the luxury of carrying on. And she said to me, you know, what has taken you 20 minutes to explain now and help me to understand, you were talking about all last week and I didn't understand a thing. I didn't get it. I got it. And I realized how important that interaction between people is. As I talk to Dia, even though I can only see her eyes because she's got a mask on, I can see that she's understanding or she's not understanding. I can throw in a question. And that interaction is so important to teaching. And the question now about how is about how we replace that or how we do the same thing. Can we? I like seeing the students, and I did it earlier this morning, and it was so refreshing to have a bunch of faces and not just icons. And yes, I would agree, and it must be left up to the pupil, but I don't want anybody to hide, but I do want to try and encourage them to come out of their own accord. And it's a difficult balance, but to me, face to face, at least seeing somebody's face and talking to a somebody and not a bunch of icons makes a difference to me as a teacher, and I do enjoy that. And I think that is something that I found we're missing. Okay, enough of my points of view. This platform is great. I appreciate the fact that schools differ with regard to their socioeconomic status and consequently learner experiences. How can this platform be utilized to reach out to schools that are in the rural areas and on e-learning? Now, Gadifele, are we talking about online in general, or are we perhaps talking about this colloquium that we're holding now? Is fairly there? Could you just focus this question? Tell me whether we're talking about getting a group of people as we have now in the Bridge COP, or are we talking about online teaching in general? Is Gadefele all right? I'm just going to hold that question. Possibly that wasn't meant to be a question. I'm not sure. Thank you, guys. Very insightful. Enjoying listening to the learners expressing themselves so clearly. They've really done well during trying times. Oh, there's a hello. Somebody trying to come through there. Hi, Peter. I'm sorry to leave. Something just came up. Okay, that's what happens. A question to teachers of maths. Is there a feeling that we've had to throw out the socio-constructive approach to teaching and learning maths and gone back to the lecture method. All right, if we're going to engage with that question, can we just leave that, Chris, can we leave that for until we have milked our panel for everything they can give us? I'll come back to that, Chris. And if I don't come back in time, please remind me. I've got Chris down there. Let's see. Thank you, presenters. Somebody else is leaving. Okay. Sorry, I've forgotten. Mr. Blooms, your first name, L. Blooms from Edunova. We do know you. Thanks, great advisor. Another one has to attend. All right, cheers. Okay, here's a question for our panel. Is there a particular science topic that you as a panel have enjoyed and understood very well that was taught online? What was that lesson topic? What one thing can you say about that topic or concept? So is there anything, any of you, that you've found has been easier to understand or that you've understood particularly well using the online rather than the face-to-face? Is there somewhere that it's worked very well to your advantage, perhaps? Can you think of anything, or is it a general no? Cisco?
The online lessons, I somehow felt like most of them were effective and they were going to be more effective in class. But one topic that I can say I enjoyed was Doppler effect in physical sciences, which generally gives us an explanation of why sounds frequencies tend to increase and decrease as a person moves towards or away from you. So that was generally an interesting topic because it was more practical and it is generally doable. So that's one topic that I can say I learned better online, and it did not really need much of interaction between the learner and the student.
Okay, and obviously your teacher was explaining it well.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Dear, have you come across anything, and if you could focus on, don't focus on science, because that would give the game away, but anything particularly science or mathematics that you found yourself saying, wow, this particular section, I understand it even better now than I might have done in the classroom. Anything like that?
I think overall I had a general understanding of everything being taught. However, the one section that I did enjoy more and was like I did understand more, well, better than others, was electricity. And in maths, it was actually graphs, which is something I'm generally not very good at. So for me to have understood it better online was a bit of a shock to me, but I did understand it much better online.
Just let's take the graphs. What was it in the presentation that you think helped you understand it better than if you'd been sitting in the class?
Well, actually, the teacher didn't really use a presentation. She actually drew it by herself and explained it. And then she just gave us additional notes to go with it. And then it was a couple of examples. But I think the way she explained it online was different to how she would have explained it in class. So I think maybe there was a bit of a difference. But overall, everything made a general.
Do you get the feeling when that has happened then, it's almost like having the teacher sitting next to you and drawing a picture for you, rather than up there on the board?
Yes, it almost felt like I was having a one-on-one lesson with the teacher and she was explaining it just to me in a way I understood it. Like she was right there, she was not standing in front of a class. She was right next to me explaining it in a one-on-one session.
So it's kind of ironic that that the online thing should make you feel more one-on-one, but there you have it. And that appealed to you clearly.
Yes.
Onati, what about you? Have you got any similar kind of experience where it's really worked for you?
Well, Miss Theory stole the words right from my mouth because I really enjoyed electricity voltage, ohms law, in math. It was graphs, exponential graphs, linear graphs, everything. I really enjoyed it more online than I would have done in person, face to face.
It's and I mean, obviously I was involved in one half of that, but these are things where you can do things graphically, obviously circuit diagrams, graphs, and that. And so a lot of it is tied up with graphics. And if you have a medium that allows you to do the graphics almost as a one-to-one, it is particularly effective. Is there, let me ask the opposite question, is there anything, any topic that has absolutely bombed for you, that has not worked at all?
We've just started mechanics online, and it's just horrible online because with mechanics, you really need the teacher to understand it and to really grasp the topic. And now online, it's not the same because the teacher's not there, and then someone else is speaking when they're not mute, and the teacher can't really hear you, and there's a clash right there, and you just go away with nothing at all.
Okay, all right. I'm not sure that that's all the fault of the online, if there's noise in the background, or all the fault of the teacher, but it is interesting that you have had both experiences, some that really work well and others that don't come across as well. What about you, Cisco?
For me, I can say one topic that I did not quite understand was in life sciences, where we had to deal with genetics and the formation of gametes. But I was fortunate because I'm doing agricultural and sciences and life sciences, both of them. So most of the topics are common for agric and life sciences. So my understanding was enhanced by agricultural sciences, but from the life science perspective, I did not really understand it. But having an agric teacher to explain it for me, I think it is something that helped me out. But yeah, it's something that actually requires you to be drawing and looking at what is actually being drawn. But because we did not use videos, that's something that I did not quite understand.
Okay, and Dia, what about you?
For me, in terms of maths and science, there wasn't a section that I particularly felt was harder. There was like a level of difficulty that was reasonable, but I feel like that level of difficulty would have remained even if I was in class. So for me, there was never really a time where I was completely lost. However, there were some things I did struggle with, but that was not really an online issue. However, for subjects more like English or languages, should I say, those subjects generally did not go as well, for the very reason that to hear a language being spoken, especially doing second and third languages, you have to hear it more than you have to write it. And for that, the online learning was particularly hard.
Okay. I think some of the comments and their comments now and questions, and all right, Nokatula says really great ideas from the panel. That's a shout out to you three. Looking forward to the COP notes to read it all together. Okay, there's a bit of discussion. Let's have a look at this one. It seems to me, says Peter Moody, it seems to me that online teaching can push teaching back towards traditional one-dimensional interaction between the teacher and learner. The teacher asks questions, learner responds, teacher confirms, repeat sequence. Many of us have been trying to bring the learner's ideas into discussion. The limitations of the online medium make it hard to make student ideas part of the learning. Any way out of this? that's a deep question, and one that will take us a long time to tease out. But let me just put it to the panel as a final question. And then I know you're itching to get back to school, so we'll perhaps release you after this. What Peter Moody is saying is that there's a very standard way of teaching science. Let's take it, he's a science teacher, where we ask questions and we get answers back, and we sort of move on in a recipe-like sequence. His style of science teaching would be to get interaction around ideas, to get real discussion. And he doesn't feel that online teaching is really able to bring us to that point of genuine discussion and battering ideas one way and another. Is there any way out of this other than getting back to school and getting together? Is there any way that you can think, and let's make this theoretical, you can have any kind of online devices and technology that you like. Is there anything that can bring us this real interaction between teacher, learner, learner and learner in this context that you can think of? And I know I'm asking a sort of a real hypothetical question here. You've had this one particular kind of experience, but open your mind. Go to town, go wild. Anything that you would do in order to get back that real feeling that I'm learning from someone and with someone, maybe with someone who knows a little bit better than me. Is there anything that you can think of? And then, having asked you the tough question, I'll allow you to go. Onati, do you want to kick off, or do you want more time to think?
I just have a few moments to think. So,
Dia?
Well, this is a hard question because there's obviously limited ways to do this. But I think maybe in maths and science, when doing examples or doing exercises, maybe it could be more of like a class discussion, not a discussion, but rather a class participation mechanism. So everybody participates or says what they think they would do when solving a particular problem, or says the method they use to solve a problem or to look at a question, or like when they read a question, what is it that they think? And then everyone sort of gives how they interpreted the question, and to see like everyone's level of understanding and how everyone looks at it differently. In terms of maths and physics, well, science, it's harder, should I say, compared to maybe having a class discussion about a book, but maybe something.
Perhaps what I'm hearing sort of hidden beneath what you're saying is that the kind of question and the kind of task becomes very important. And maybe the kind of question must be very different from the conventional questions that we ask. It must be something that perhaps presents you with a problem to solve and something new to learn and to find a new approach. And it mustn't just be done there in order to help you remember something better. It must be a real problem.
Yeah,
and
the
with
real
that,
problem that we can all like work
involved.
together in order to solve, to like teamwork and different ideas and just incorporation of everybody's like personal opinions. Just
Okay. So we need to think about how we frame the content of what we're doing. It mustn't just be learning for an exam, to write a test and learn certain stuff.
From what I've experienced, to do the same activities or same type of questions over again. For example, the teacher like teaches the lesson, then we get an activity to do, and then every day it's the same thing. The teacher teaches the lesson, we get an activity to do. And I think sometimes sitting by yourself and just doing those activities and just listening to the teacher can become a bit monotonous and boring, and you lose your focus. It becomes too mundane and ordinary. So to have something where it's a bit more challenging or different becomes a real, like, it like rejuvenates your focus. So then you want to participate, you want to do it more, and it just, you feel a lot better. It's like a breath of fresh air.
Okay. And we're coming back to variety. Cisco, I'm going to ask you, and then I'll go back to Anati to see if he's got anything to add, and then we will take our leave. Cisco, anything to add there?
I think I quite agree with her, with Dia. And one thing that we should all know is that all learners are different, and it might be difficult for a teacher to actually create a platform where everyone is going to understand the same way. So I think what teachers could do is to give the learners a chance to introduce a certain topic, because I believe when you don't understand a certain topic, it's not that you were lost along the way. It's a matter of you not understanding the topic from the beginning. So the teacher may be giving the learners a platform to actually express what they think of the topic, and giving them time to research before the teacher actually gets deep into the topic. And then I believe that a teacher is there to only facilitate learning of a learner, and not to be giving information, asking questions, and only confirming. Because I think that actually promotes a system where the learner only listens to the teacher and has nothing to say in class. And it also promotes situations where everything that the teacher says, the learner just believes is correct. And if I feel like what the teacher said has some sort of a mistake, I'm not able to correct the teacher, or I'm not able to get any clarity, because the teacher is just there to teach. So I think the interaction between the learner and the teacher should be more of socio-academic, if that exists, so that learners are able to benefit from the class, instead of just getting information from a teacher and having the same routine over and over again, like Dia said.
Okay, can I just ask you a question? You're writing matric now. Is teaching anywhere in your future plans?
No.
What a pity. What a pity. Anyway, thank you. Nati, the final word to you.
So I agree 100% with what the lady was saying, but I also think it depends on not just the job, but the subject. In a conventional subject like science or math, I think up to the teacher to make it more like fun, interact with the student. Where if you get a subject, sorry for going a bit off topic, but like history, which Mr. Mesa used to teach me, it's up to you to interpret it the way you interpret it, and then on that you'll the discussion with the teachers and the other learners. So I think conventional subject, it's more up to the teacher to find ways of making it more interesting and more interactive with the learners, if that makes sense.
Okay, well, it does, and everything that you guys have said has not only made sense. I think it's made teachers think. Those of us that have heard you speaking, insightful, says Chambula. Great to hear from learners themselves. Yes, it is. I think that's where we will end the panel discussion. It's always terribly exciting when you put something like this together, and then you get three people who you've never met before. They've been recommended to you, and I can say with good sense, so whoever recommended you guys, they gave us some real stars. You've been very, very good. It really has been wonderful to hear you talking, and I think because you've been talking to a fairly closed group of people, we should somehow take back to your schools for teachers, especially now, to find ways of talking to their pupils and listening to them very carefully, as I'm sure we all have done today, because there is real wisdom and real value in much of what you've said to us today. So, Onati, dear Cisco, thank you very much for being with us. And for all of you, especially Cisco, good luck with the exams. It's going to be fascinating to see how things go from here, given your very different experience that you've had. So thank you, and you're very welcome to stay. By the way, I'm not kicking you out. We're not going to start teacher stuff that you shouldn't hear. You're welcome to stay if you would like to, but that will be the end of the panel. And thank you very much for being here. Now, what I'd like to suggest for the rest of us, we don't have to take a tea break now, because you can go and do that anytime you like. People would like to come in and rather than write it, say it. There must be little aha moments that you had as our panelists spoke, as they responded to particular questions. You might have had thoughts which took you out on some sort of a tangent that you are going to tuck away for further thought and for further work. Could I spend 15, 20 minutes allowing the floor to express opinions, express ideas, highlight things that they thought were particularly important? And after that, we will allow you to ask questions based on that, or to ask questions of our original speakers. I'm not sure if they're still here. I know that some of them, one of them had some time restraints, but I would like to invite you to add whatever you would like to add, perhaps to reiterate a question that I might have missed, and to say something about that. But there we go. The floor is yours.
Can I say something, Peter?
Please, Godfele.
Yes, thank you. And thank you very much for this exciting interaction. What I noted is, I think, Unati, that with e-learning, the level of engagement, especially for schools and learners who are in rural areas, and for obvious reasons, becomes very low compared to schools and learners who are in reasonably well-to-do areas. In the school where I'm working, we have also experimented with e-learning. We started a little bit late. I think we've just been doing it for a month. And we also noted that even when learners were given data, even when they were given gadgets, the level of engagement continued to remain low. And this is something that is I would imagine I have been knowing this, and we all know this, but this is something that we will have to look at. How can we improve the level of engagement? The last thing that I would want to and to have comments for, particularly maybe from Lawrence if he's still around, is to what extent has e-learning gone relatively low as soon as learners came back to school? Because in our school, we realized that with teachers, especially in grade 12, with the pressure of having to complete the curriculum, they will naturally fall back on the norm or what they have been comfortable with, and no longer be that vigorous with online teaching. Thank you.
Okay, just before Lawrence comes in and responds to that, I've just been reminded that in fact our finishing time is 12 o'clock, not 1 o'clock. But it's amazing how time flies when you're having fun. I hadn't really noticed what the time was. So we're seeing people starting to leave to go to other meetings. Benta tells me that there are a lot that do have other engagements. So let's just make a more or less formal end to the COP, and we can then stay on for a few minutes for a bit of interaction for those that still have things to say. But obviously, you're absolutely free to say your goodbyes and go off to your next engagements. I'd just like to thank everybody for being here. Not everybody was able to participate, and that's perfectly understandable. I hope that you got something useful out of our keynote speakers. One more philosophical, one very practical, but those things have to be married if we're going to call this an education system. Because a system without some good thinking behind it is a system that's going to go nowhere fast. I hope too that you have got value out of what our young visitors had to tell us, because there is great wisdom in young people, as we know to our cost when we don't take enough heed of things that they say and things that they intimate to us through in various ways. So I think it's been very useful. Obviously, this discussion is a young one, but it is one that that has to go places, because otherwise we're going to be in real trouble. And in fact, Kadefele's question that we're ending up on now is, when we get back into classroom, are we going to keep elements of what we've developed over the lockdown period because it is useful? And that, of course, is going to take another serious discussion to tease out what can be done better in that way, because we know what we've missed, but what is it that we've learned that we can use to improve the education system that we get back into, and what will the new normal be? So thank you very much for being here. For those of you that have to leave, see you at the next COP, which will be later in the year, somewhere around October, I would imagine, end of October, but we'll be in touch with you and let you know. Thank you, goodbye, drive safely if you're driving, and go and have a nice cup of tea if you're not. Bye. Okay, that is not telling people that they have to leave, but it's for those of you that wish to leave. Just before we ask Lawrence to respond to Kadefele, I had a very nice comment here from Takalani Siala. We know each other well, and she made a point. Let me just get back to it. Where is it? Where is it? Takalani, why am I not reading your comment? You can make the comment yourself. Takalani, the point that you were making about teacher engagement and so on, are you able to respond? No, she's making coffee. I better find it here then. Oh, Peter Moody thinks my beard is magnificent. He differs from my wife. All right.
Here.
There you go, Takalani. You say it yourself. Why do I read it when you can say it?
What I'm saying is that if a teacher is able to, that this now goes to pedagogy itself. If a teacher is able to create conversations in the classroom, that teacher will be able to do that online as well. And this is what I've experienced myself when I was teaching, because one of the learners from your panel already said that they felt as if they were one-on-one with the teacher. So it's very easy to then create those conversations that the learners then will have to listen to each other, and then you sit there as a facilitator. And then you will get great ideas from the learners. If you're doing maths, you will see things that they are doing as well.
Okay. And we may perhaps have to be brave enough to try those things where we are forced to give away some control, which sometimes is a bit intimidating for teachers to do that. But yes, it can be done. I was quite impressed with the comment that was made about that one-to-one feeling. It did seem to relate to a particular kind of content, which lent itself to that, which is some more stuff to go and theorize about. Lawrence, if after all my chatting you can still remember, is Lawrence here? Yes, he is. If we can still remember what Kadefele was asking, would you like to respond?
Yes, Peter, thank you. But before I respond to Kadifile, I would just want to make a quick comment on what Takalani has said. I think, yeah, it's true that we need to keep reviewing our teaching methodologies. For a teacher who is teacher-centered in the classroom, that teacher will still be teacher-centered when we are online. And if you observe the engagement that is on this platform, Peter, that you are leading, there's been quite a good engagement. There's been a one-to-one engagement. There's been engagement from the learners. There's been engagement from the presenters, from the participants. So I would imagine that this were a classroom where you, Peter, are the teacher and you're engaging each and every child in your classroom, or which is taking in your class, which is taking place online. So the question of whether teachers are going back to traditional methods of teaching when they adapt to online teaching, it's a matter of teachers constantly reviewing and looking at how their methodologies are going. In the same way, they would also review their methodologies in the classroom. So I think it's doable. It's possible for us to engage learners when we are teaching them online. And then to Kadifile's point, I'm just trying to Peter, can you please just quickly refresh my memory?
On what Kadifile was saying?
Yes.
Kadifile
Yes,
is still
Peter.
there. Just
Yes.
Just in a sentence, what were you asking, Lawrence?
Oh, okay, I just got it, Peter. That's fine.
Okay.
So I think Kadifile's question was on whether we are slowing down the pace on using online classes as things are going back to normal. More and more children are coming back to school, and the question is if our online is getting less and less compared to what it was probably 3 months or 4 months back. And my own observations are that we have slowed down on online teaching, but I think we have an opportunity here. As things get back to normal, we have an opportunity to look at the methodologies that we were using during tough times in terms of online classes and reflect on that and get an opportunity to strengthen what we could have done better. Because truth be told, when we introduced this system, we introduced that in difficult times, in tough times, but now things are loosening up. We have got enough time, we've got enough opportunity to relook at what we've been doing and bring more and more insight into what could have been done differently. I'll give an example of Vleka. What we have done is that specifically for our grade 12s, because they now come to school on a daily basis, so there are no online classes taking place. But through the use of Microsoft Teams, what we've done is to record, to have, to live stream all our classes. So all the classes that are taking place, they can be accessed on Microsoft Teams. And so a child can access Microsoft Teams at their own time and get into the class that took place today or that took place yesterday or last week. So that has got several advantages to that. One, we have been able to get access to learners whose parents have not been comfortable enough to send them back to school. So they can still use Microsoft Teams to check what was happening in class while they were at home. Secondly, it also gives an opportunity for learners who are slow learners who might have missed something in class, but during their own time on a weekend or in an evening, they can be able to go back to what was done during the day and refresh their memory and remember what was done in class. So that's a great advantage for continuing to use the online system that we have been using. And for other grades, what we have done is that we're blending our learning, where we have got days learners come to school, and on the days that they are not coming to school, they are having classes online. So we've got online classes running concurrently with learning that's happening in school, because we have followed a staggered process of getting our kids back to school. So junior classes do not come to school on a daily basis, but on the days that they are not in school, they still have classes going on Teams. And they've got an opportunity when they come to school to still engage their teachers on things that they might have missed online. So I feel in as much as things are loosening up and we're going back to school, we still need to make this or take this as an opportunity where we should refine what we did not do well during the tough times.
Okay.
That's my response to.
Thank you, Lawrence. And I'm wondering if that isn't a fairly comprehensive statement, which we could use as our closing statement, that what we learn, what we have learned and perhaps still are learning about teaching methods under lockdown and online, it hasn't all just been a simple replacement for what should have been there. It has also been a time of learning things that might be effectively incorporated into what we offer hereafter, and that we should not. And when I say hereafter, I'm not talking about on our temporal life, not our spiritual life, but perhaps we're learning things now that we can incorporate into education and not throw it all out just because we're going back to school. I do get a sense that is what is being said, but that is very true, and that there have been some things that have been very effective. For instance, I had to miss a class to be here, and I taught that class at 11:15 last night, and I put it onto the Google Classroom, and it was there for people to listen to or ignore, but then they don't ignore that any more than they ignore me in a normal class. So what's the difference? Thank you very much for being with us.